Imagine waking up one day and realizing an entire people are gone. No ruins, no mass graves, no official apology, just absence. Argentina is one of the whitest countries in the Americas today, but 2 centuries ago, it wasn't. So what happened to them? Most people believe Argentina never had a black population that is. In the late 1700s, Buenos Aires was nearly half African descent. Think about that for a second. We're talking about vibrant black neighborhoods, decorated black soldiers fighting for independence, talented black musicians shaping the earliest rhythms of what would become tango. They were visible, they were counted, they were documented, and then they began to vanish from the official story. How does a population of that size just fade away? The answer is more chilling than you might think. It wasn't a single catastrophic event. It was a slow, deliberate process, a story hidden in plain sight, a lie that many still believe to this day. We're going to uncover how it happened. There was no single law titled Erase Black Argentinians. You won't find a document with that name. Argentina's elite in the 19th century wanted to build what they called the Europe of South America. They envisioned a nation that was white, modern, and prestigious in the eyes of the world powers. And the method they used to achieve this was a concept known as Blanqueamiento, or whitening. This wasn't about overt violence or putting people back in chains. It was about policy. It was a series of quiet, calculated decisions made in government offices, military headquarters, and high society drawing rooms. It was a plan with no official name, but its goal was unmistakable: to systematically dilute, diminish, and ultimately erase the country's African heritage from its national identity. One census, one law, one generation at a time. When war arrived, selection began. This is where the demographic engineering gets brutally efficient. Black men were disproportionately drafted into the military. But it wasn't just that they were drafted. They were sent to the front lines, given the worst equipment, and placed in the most dangerous positions. Think of the wars of independence against Spain. And then, most devastatingly, the War of the Triple Alliance. This conflict against Paraguay was one of the bloodiest in human history. An absolute meat grinder. Entire black communities lost their men. The official records would later call these soldiers heroes, patriots who died for the nation. But back home, the streets grew quieter. The imbalance between men and women in the Afro-Argentine community grew stark. This wasn't just a consequence of war. It was war used as a filter, a way to physically remove a specific part of the population, while framing it as a noble sacrifice for the country they were being written out of. Now, here's where the story turns even colder and more calculated. While black men were being sent to die in wars, what was happening to the women in the community left behind? The policy of Blanqueamiento continued, but in a different form. Black women were often allowed into European households, working as domestic staff. This proximity led to relationships and marriages, often unequal ones, with white men, including new European immigrants. Their children, who were of mixed heritage, were frequently reclassified on official documents. Suddenly, black became trigueño or simply white. Skin tone became a matter of paperwork. This wasn't an accident. It was demographic engineering at its most intimate level. By separating women from their communities and encouraging unions that would lighten the skin of the next generation, the state was able to erase the identity without erasing the body. An entire lineage could vanish from the census in a single generation, absorbed into the white majority. On top of war and reclassification, poverty was weaponized. After the men were gone, the remaining black communities were systematically marginalized. Access to quality education was blocked. Good jobs were denied. Housing was restricted to specific, undesirable neighborhoods. These areas, like the infamous Barrio del Tambor, became dangerously overcrowded and completely neglected by the city. They lacked basic sanitation, clean water, and medical care. So when the yellow fever epidemic swept through Buenos Aires in the 1870s, it wasn't an indiscriminate killer. It was like a guided missile. The disease tore through these underfunded, densely packed neighborhoods first, and with the most ferocity, thousands died. The disease didn't choose its victims based on race, but the policies of segregation and deliberate neglect had already chosen where it would hit the hardest. It was a public health crisis that served a political goal. While one population was being systematically erased, another was being actively imported. This is the other half of the Blanqueamiento strategy. The Argentine government launched massive campaigns to attract European immigrants. They offered free land, subsidized travel, and the promise of a new life. Millions of Europeans answered the call, pouring in from Italy, Spain, France, and Germany. They were funded, welcomed, and celebrated as the builders of the new Argentina. The entire city of Buenos Aires was redesigned to look more like Paris, with wide boulevards and grand European-style architecture. At the same time, history books were the language used to describe the nation's past changed. And most crucially, census categories were altered. The option to identify as Afro-descendant simply vanished from the forms. Black identity wasn't just killed or exiled. It was overwritten, buried under a new, imported, and state-sponsored national narrative. Let's look at the number that reveals the shocking success of this plan. In the late 1770s, as we said, people of African descent made up a massive, visible portion of the population, up to a third or even half in cities like Buenos Aires. Fast forward to the early 1900s. According to the official national census, the black population of Argentina was listed as less than 1%, from nearly 50% to under 1% in just over a century. This didn't happen because people disappeared overnight in some cataclysm. It happened because the nation, through a multi-pronged strategy of war, miscegenation, neglect, and immigration, decided they were no longer worth counting, no longer worth remembering. The disappearance wasn't physical, not entirely. It was statistical. It was a disappearance on paper, a masterful act of national rebranding that succeeded beyond its architects' wildest dreams. Today, tourists walk the beautiful streets of Buenos Aires, admiring the European architecture, enjoying the tango, never knowing the history that once stood right where they are. There are no major memorials to the Afro-Argentine soldiers, no prominent statues of black cultural figures, no national museums dedicated to telling this story. There is just silence. The legacy of Blanqueamiento is not just the demographic shift, it's the void that it left behind. Because the most effective and permanent form of erasure is the one that convinces the world, and even the nation itself, that there was nothing there to begin with. It's a story about how a country can make a people disappear, not by killing them, but by simply choosing to forget. Thanks for watching. If you found this story important, please like and subscribe for more hidden histories.